Full disclosure, I'm Robin Farzad.
You really could see in 10 years down the line, we are able to just fully connect and be in the office and be with our friends with the headset on. With holograms appearing in our living room is not a crazy idea, and that's all built off of us logging in still to our Facebook accounts.
Joanna Stern, Wall Street Journal tech guru, hours for the hour. Stay with us. Subscribe to Full Disclosure on Apple Podcasts at link fulldradio.com, on NPR One, and on Spotify. Follow on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Full D Radio. Joining me from New York, it's a pleasure to finally have you on. Joanna Stern, senior personal technology columnist and all-around video genius at the Wall Street Journal. You've been an award-winning journalist. You spent the better part of 2 decades, your bio said, covering gadgets and apps and helping people make smarter tech decisions. You received the 2016 Loeb Award in video for your hilarious, I always catch them there, can't miss, the informative short films, including one I believe you did with Rupert Murdoch in the News Corp elevator?
There was one. You really are a fan. Many ages ago with an Apple Watch review, I will not say it was an authentic run-in. I pretended to run into him and he grabbed my Apple Watch.
Oh my goodness. Does he even use a smartphone? I mean, it's alleged that he has a flip phone still, or that he's notoriously technology. I don't want to get you fired or anything, but that's the lore.
Well, I mean, you'd be pretty lucky if Rupert Murdoch listened to your podcast, I'd have to say.
That's a good point. I'd be pretty lucky if my mother listened to my podcast. But anyway, leave that aside. Thank you for joining us. And you're joining us, let me just timestamp it for anyone, at a parlous time with this attempted coup in Washington, D.C. I can't believe I'm saying it, but it's actually germane to this conversation, in that anything that happens nowadays, everything will be televised because everybody is carrying a powerful recorder, camcorder, camera right in your pockets. I mean, you saw that old Radio Shack ad with that guy holding a camcorder and everything, and it's now consolidated into the smartphone. Just kind of, what are your thoughts on this being just meticulously recorded for posterity?
I have so many thoughts about when something like this happens and the role of technology. In fact, I just tweeted, and maybe the tweet wasn't, sort of well crafted, but the summary of it is that it's days like this where I just feel like mobile technology and the rise it gave to social media apps is one of the worst things to happen in our world. Because you look at these protesters, if you want to call them that, I don't know what to call them, and you know that this was orchestrated through one of the many online social media tools, a Facebook, a Twitter. We don't know, which one right now. We know it was instigated by our president and others telling people to get out there. And so this is you can't blame one single thing, but it was certainly a tool. It's a tool. And so you can't, just as you're saying, everyone's got this tool in their pocket to film everything that happens. Sometimes that's great. Sometimes that's horrible. Right. And that's the double-edged sword of technology and smartphones. And I think what we've really learned over the last almost decade, less than that, right, was first part of the decade was really so much excitement about these new devices. And then we started to realize what the consequences are.
And there's this parallel headline, and I know you don't cover markets, but it's always kind of ancillary to the stories, that the Dow reaches a record close. The NASDAQ did drop as protests escalate at U.S. Capitol. And I think that's a segue into, some of the most amazing performers in this market during the pandemic. If I had kind of scripted the year 2020 for you, big tech. I mean, big tech really brought it. If you think about Tesla, if you think about Zoom, if you think about Amazon, how pervasive they are in our lives and how indispensable. If they were too big to fail at the very beginning, they just became true behemoths at the very end. That even as many people, I'm sure, approached you, that things that were supposed to happen, seismic shifts over 3, 4, 5 years, suddenly happen in less than 12 months.
And I've loved actually covering that from a personal tech perspective, because it has accelerated how so many of us use our own devices. And then, yes, from a macro level, it's crazy, right? Like from a societal and, as you're saying, even business, like it's nuts what happened. And I always try to take things and look at the lens of how are we using our technology and what's that mean for the world, but also how do we help ourselves and understand all of this? Sort of just try to come at that lens. But Yeah, I mean, what a year with the pandemic and the political unrest, and even with some of the racial injustice and some of those events. And I think you kicked this off talking about we've all got camcorders in our pockets, and that's one place where I did a piece in June on the people, the bystanders who have witnessed some of this racial injustice and police brutality, and it's not even second nature anymore, right? It's instinct to just take out our phones and record something that's good or bad. And what those videos have done and what those have done to change the tide of history. The piece I did in June actually was like looking a little bit at the technical side, because when people first started recording these things, you couldn't really make out what was happening, right? Versus what happened back in June with George Floyd. This was recorded on a brand new iPhone. It was so crystal clear what was happening, and
Right.
You couldn't ignore the technology at the center of that story.
And you compare that in comparison to the Rodney King riots, right? And the Rodney King footage, which was so grainy. Or you think back to Tiananmen, if you think back to various disturbances where the footage was so elusive, you're correct. I mean, the revolution, the disruption, everything will be televised right now. I mean, I joke with friends from high school. I couldn't get my butt kicked in high school. No one can get their butt kicked in private anymore. Everybody's filming everything. Everybody pulls out a smartphone. Everything ends up on Insta or Snapchat, with the generational divide. So there's suddenly this surveillance state by default, by dint of everybody having one of these.
Absolutely. And they're only getting better, and they're only going to get more pervasive, and they're only going to get more ubiquitous around us, which is going to be, I guess, exciting, but also scary. I think today I come at it from a little bit of a different lens. If we talk tomorrow, or if we had talked yesterday, I would probably be a lot more optimistic.
Well, Joanna, take me back to the inception of the pandemic, because I always, I geek out with my tech friends on Zoom. It really came out of nowhere. It's become synonymous with just work from home and teleconferencing with people. Right now, they're like, "Do you want to get on the phone or do you want to Zoom?" Why did Zoom suddenly come out of nowhere when we were all either using FaceTime or Skype or even WhatsApp or one of the Facebook properties, WhatsApp or Messenger? Why did we suddenly all know that we could gravitate to something that I had never heard of, frankly, before that?
I want to say boxes, like just simple box layout of having people's face in a grid, or your faces in a grid, was something that you had it on Google Hangouts, but Google
Right.
Hangouts wasn't as like pervasive in the sense of like, not everyone in your corporate that you would work with in business was using Google as their platform. Zoom had more of the sort of cross-platform. It was more, I guess, easy for companies to say, okay, you can send out this link and anyone can join this video chat. It really seemed like that at the beginning of the pandemic. It seems like these like small features that Zoom had, that changing backgrounds, being able to adjust to the beauty filter on your face, the grid layout, and it sort of just went viral, right? People were like, you can do this on Zoom. You can, everyone was first changing their backgrounds, and people were like, you can do this on Zoom. Get on a Zoom. Let's all have drinks and clown happy hour and whatever else people were doing in front of their Zooms. And it just took off. And I honestly, I have to say too, like I had used Zoom for some sort of like work meetings or something like that, but never would have thought like, oh, I'm going to tell my mom to get on Zoom with my son, right? Like FaceTime is always the thing we always did with them. Going back three years now, that since I've had my son. Mm-hmm. And now we still use FaceTime for that kind of stuff, but Zoom is like, it's part of the vernacular. It's like, oh, everyone just get on Zoom.
Yeah, but you know what? Skype was part of vernacular. And this gets into the conversation of, look who owns Skype, Microsoft, which understands the enterprise, supposedly. Look who owns, FaceTime. And yes, that is an Apple to Apple product, but iPhones are fairly ubiquitous. I mean, look who owns WhatsApp and Messenger. It's Facebook. Everybody had these on their smartphones. And I'm still struck that a kind of a player, a third party out of nowhere, just came in and drank that milkshake.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't like written specifically about the like Zoom rise. I mean, I've done a number of stories on video calling tips and how to work, get your whole setup to look good, and how to make your whole work from home setup look and work well. But I think with the Zoom thing, it just sort of, I mean, maybe it is what you're saying. Like, it's like they're kind of the Switzerland, like they weren't affiliated with a Facebook and a Google or an Apple. And so people just were like, oh, you can use this no matter what device you're on. Though all those other, I mean, other than FaceTime, all the others really provide that sort of cross-platform functionality. Skype is an interesting one. I mean, and funny, I got my start in my career out of college. I wanted to go into public relations. I mean, I thought I wanted to go into journalism, and it was actually quite hard at that time to like find a good journalism job.
Of course.
And I was like, okay, I'll go into public relations. My mom ran a public relations company, and I ended up at a tech public relations company, and I was working on the Skype client. And that's how actually I got my start into like really being interested in tech, because I was reading all the tech press, the early days of tech press. I was reading TechCrunch and GigaOM and all the blogs that were starting up in Gadget, and we were trying to get people to cover Skype. And Skype was basically the same as it is now. I mean, that's the thing. Like, it was a video calling platform, and people didn't really want a video call then. So there was a big push to get people to use Skype because it was cheap calling, cheap international calling. It wasn't really something you'd want to do on your cell phone or even like a landline at that time.
Right.
And Skype just, they were always ahead. They always had not always, but like then they very quickly had multi-party. You could add number of callers. And people just like didn't remember Skype. I mean, people knew it and people still know the name. But, if you ask people like, oh, do you have Skype on your phone? The majority of people don't.
So it's so interesting in that Microsoft owns Skype and LinkedIn. And these are things that everybody really seem to use. I mean, if you talk about a foot in the door for enterprise or something where, if you're talking about business, chances are somebody has a LinkedIn profile, and chances are they would have a Skype thing. So it's striking to me that was kind of an opportunity that, as you're right, a Switzerland, a total, player out of left field. And then what about this Shopify? Have you heard of it in Canada?
I have heard of it. I can't say that I've really covered it or I really understand yet the full appeal, but more I understand that like people are using it as the infrastructure for their business and seems to be sort of taking off, and now all the other companies are trying to aim at it, Amazon specifically.
And to what extent do people fanboy you on Tesla? It's kind of the most talked about, company of our time. Suddenly out of nowhere this year, in this pandemic year, they get added to the S&P 500. There's this quantum leap, like 500,000 vehicles shipped, battery technology, years ahead of other players. And snap your fingers, in this economic and public health crisis, it is the most valuable car maker on the planet. Do you often get asked, like, when are you going to buy? When are you going to make that leap? When are you going to take that leap? What is your interest in it? How much of a role does it play in your life?
Well, I actually should ask you, how should I cover Tesla from a personal technology perspective? And I kind of cover the gamut of what I cover, like in terms of everything from phones to apps to, I just did a big project on digital legacy. Like nothing really, I say, to my editors, I'm like, there's nothing I shouldn't be able to not cover, because tech and personal tech invades every part of society and the tech industry. But I sort of come at it as like, what's the product? How does it impact you? How do we think about like explaining that in a bigger way to people? And with Tesla, it's always been like, they're a car company, or, they're kind of a car company. They're a tech company. What are they? And now they're sort of like one of the most important, and for people who own Tesla, like people will say like, this is the best gadget I own, but I don't really know how I should cover it.
Well, doesn't that remind you of people, initially with their iPhones in 2007 and 2008, that they maybe overlooked? I know you were much younger back then, but they overlooked the fact that the AT&T network was crappy. There's so much product lust. There's so much passion for the product that it does seem like it's one of those quantum leap tech innovations. I would think of this as a technology company first and foremost. I mean, it ceases to be that it has far fewer parts than your internal combustion car. If we're talking about charging, it's you're leasing the vehicle. You're talking about gains in battery technology and functionality. Isn't there a big part of you that suddenly feels like you are the most equipped person at the newspaper to cover Tesla from a product perspective? Because electronic vehicles are new products that are going to disrupt something that we've now known for 100 years.
Certainly. And I guess I have to just think about where can I enter the space and and give some useful advice, and I think also come in and help people understand why this is much more than just a car. But yeah, I mean, look, I've been eyeing one of the Teslas. I am stuck in a lease right now with a gas guzzler, I have to admit, mostly because I went for a safety. I went for a Volvo. You had your first kid, you get a Volvo. It's how it goes. And
I went Subaru. I hear you. I feel you. Yeah.
I love the Volvo, but I hate how much gas I have to put in that thing.
Sure.
And I think I've got to make a change.
Full disclosure, I'm Robin Farzad. You're listening to Joanna Stern. She's senior personal technology columnist and video celebrity at the Wall Street Journal. You received the 2016 Loeb Award in video for your, I mean, again, you have to go on Joanna's Twitter timeline and follow any video thing she does. I remember what was one you did like last year where you were in a capsule in a bubble, or you tried to self-isolate or something? I was like, wow, how do you turn these around?
Yeah, well, that one was, Samsung released a foldable phone that was really not meant for using in the world. If you got a speck of dust in it, or if your fingernail sort of grazed the screen the wrong way, it could break the phone. And so it sort of felt like, this thing is meant to be used in a bubble. And so I asked my producer, go find a bubble. And he found one, and we went.
So talk me through that. How do you scramble the jets to do something like this? Because now you're a video producer as well, and this historically was not the province of the newspaper, even the online version of it. I'm thinking back to All Things Digital and Walter Mossberg. They'd be very straightforward. He'd hold up the handset and these are the rubber grips on the phone. I like them. It was very straightforward. It's like sometimes he even did them out of his laundry room or something. But you're doing these like Quibi caliber Hollywood productions, and that's possible and economic in this environment?
I think that's one of the beauties of working at the Wall Street Journal. But I will say a couple of things. One, Walt is a mentor to me. And when I took the job, I spoke with him about it. And he was so great. And he's such a, as we say, mensch.
A mensch.
He's just a wonderful guy. And I said, I want to do some things differently. And when I was applying for the job, the editor at the time who hired me, his name is Jonathan Krim. He's not with the Journal anymore. He said, I want you to focus on video. You seem to be really interested in video. I think video is going places. Our video department here isn't exactly that out of the box. Why don't you just come and try it here? And I was like, okay. I asked for what I needed in terms of resources. They were able to get it, and I was off to the races. And I was given just such an open field to experiment. And my hope there was just to make tech interesting and fun, personal tech interesting and fun, and be able to bring a different side of myself and a side of the paper that I just felt like wasn't really there. And I've taken that in a lot of different directions. I think a lot of people know me for some of these really fun concept videos. I've done everything from review a phone fully underwater. That was the Galaxy Note many years ago.
I remember that, yeah.
I've done the bubble. I've done, I reviewed the 5G iPhone alone at a stadium a couple of months ago at MetLife Stadium here in New Jersey. I've done some crazy things, but I've also, tried to broaden that at the Journal and really bring my creativity along with some of the journalism that we do, some of the deeper journalism. So last year I led a series on Amazon. We did it 2 years ago now, and was actually nominated for 2 Emmys. And, just thinking a little bit about how do we explore the size and power of Amazon in a video series? What are the things that we can visually show that our competitors aren't doing? And then more recently, I actually ended up working on a short form documentary on a more serious topic on digital legacy and what happens to ourselves or our memories and our stories after we die, and how can they continue online. So the Journal's just been amazing and giving me sort of the runway to do these things.
So from a hardware perspective, I got to ask, are you chiefly using smartphones to film these? I mean, what kind of resources do you have to marshal? I understand that everything is now done in the cloud. It's not like we're carrying around video cassettes or putting this stuff on DVDs or big drives. Everything is kind of hardware light, and you can get unbelievable resolution, whatever it is, 4K on the even the 2-year-old smartphones that you're getting out of Android or Apple, that it's easier than ever for a hobbyist or a small-time person or a person in high school to make something, as you see in the Apple ads, kind of look Hollywood caliber.
Yeah, so we don't shoot with iPhones. We shoot with some really nice Sony gear, FS5, FS7 cameras. You're right, they're digital, and we shoot and we capture on SD cards. And I don't consider myself a director of photography. I'm not a cinematographer. One of my producers is wonderful at that. His name is Kenny Wasis. Hired him just to help me up my production game and make the videos look great and up the creativity of them. For other series like this Amazon one, we had one whole episode in Bangladesh. We had to hire people there. We had other parts of that here in the US. We had other parts of that over in the UK. So sort of use a network of freelancers and definitely I'm not shooting on my own. I mean, we've shot some stuff with iPhones. I mean, in the early part of the pandemic, because we were all in lockdown and we weren't shooting at all, I shot everything on my iPhone. I do have a good Sony camera, and I just had no patience for it. I was like, this iPhone with the Filmic app installed was just perfect for me. And I would send the footage to my producer or another editor, and we'd be off to the races. So yeah, there's so many options, and that's the beautiful thing. I mean, I watch so much TikTok. Are you watching TikTok?
Yes.
Are you down the holes of TikTok? I mean,
I'm near that divide. Yeah.
I mean, I real like so much more of my time I'm watching just, it's not crappy. It's not crappy cell phone video anymore, but so much of my time I'm watching, footage on TikTok or Instagram or Twitter that's shot with an iPhone, probably also edited very nicely sometimes with an iPhone or some other software. And it's kind of amazing. I mean, it's just like, I really don't think also a lot of people see the difference anymore.
Well, illustrate some of your work from home learning curve for me, if you will. Like some of the things that you realized, hacks that are possible. We clearly all had to learn on the fly. As I said, when March struck and the order hit and the lockdowns happened, especially in New York, you had to suddenly figure out how to do it faster, cheapest, kind of, in your case, filing stories, the video footage, what's barely good enough versus the perfect standard of the Sony cam. Tell us about what you learned along the way.
I learned that you have to buy so much stuff. It's just like, it's funny. Like I of all people should have all this gear, right? I'm always testing stuff, or I've over the years accumulated stuff that I've bought for projects. And I had a lot of it here, but I mean, I'm looking around my home office now, like this good mic I had, I didn't have that. I bought that. I didn't have this nicer monitor. I didn't have these better headphones. All of this stuff. I had okay stuff, and this stuff is probably okay, comparable to some studio quality stuff that other people have. But yeah, I had to just bring it all home. And it's funny, like pre-pandemic, I used to work from home. When I first started the Journal, I worked from home a little bit more. And then at some point I took sort of more of a leadership role at the Journal in the video department. And I started going into the office every day. And after that, I just found it very hard to sort of work in two places. So I would go to the office and I'd spend a lot of time in the office, and I have a nice little office there that has all my stuff there. And people just knew me to be in there till, from some midday point of the day to like all night. And so it was difficult for me to not be able to just be there and be able to go to somebody's desk and ask them to do something, or to, even on the video edits, to not be able to go over to a producer's desk and say, oh, let me see where the cut is at right now. Let's see what the edit's looking like. Or, let's move that shot here, move this shot here. That's so hard to do remotely. And we figured out a lot of ways in between. So yeah, I think it's like my story's like anyone else's. You just adjust and you find the right things.
What do you think about, I don't know if you take some weekend time or late evening time to scroll through Rockefeller Center, where I guess your office is. I also was there when I was at Business Week. It's all such a ghost town right now. When you look around you at the millions and millions of square feet of just idled office space, and a lot of companies on the fence about wholeheartedly returning. As you know, many of the companies you cover in Silicon Valley are giving their employees lots of runway in terms of when they want them back in the office, if ever.
I really think it's going to look different for so much of New York. I really do. I mean, I've gone a couple of times now back to the office to go record something in higher quality, or go shoot something in New York, or just grab something. And it's just crazy. I mean, Midtown is a ghost town. The lunchtime at Midtown, I mean, it's sad. And so, I mean, I go to the local coffee shop that I used to go to every afternoon. Would always go out with one of somebody else I'd work with, or, say, oh, let's go meet for coffee at the place on 46th and 7th or whatever it is. And I went by there and it's just like nobody's there. So when I go now, I'm like, I'm going to have 15 coffees. You feel so sad. You feel so guilty that this has happened. I mean, but yeah, I even when I see it coming back, I don't see everyone going back.
Joanna, when I looked at the piece that you put out at the beginning of the year, Tech That Will Change Your Life in 2021, you mentioned something that I think is increasingly hitting a nerve. Let me just read the headline here. New ways to work, exercise, see the doctor, watch movies, and sanitize. Every surface and site will continue to proliferate. So will monthly subscription fees. Talk to me, if you will, about this incipient, more than incipient, it's kind of full-blown right now, login fatigue, right? I mean, we have not just the Spotify login, not just, your iCloud login if you're on the Apple system, but Amazon wants you to be a member of Prime and Prime Video. We wanted to watch Tehran so badly, and Apple needs to upsell me to Apple TV Plus. My brother pays for Netflix and shares the password with me. The kids want to see Disney Plus. You have all of these ancillary things like Discovery and Peacock and HBO Max. Do you ever wonder kind of how much is enough? It seems like they're reassembling the cable dial.
It's funny. I wrote a piece about this, like maybe it was a year ago, 2 years ago, and I got so chewed at for it because, of course, I work for a subscription publication, and my salary is mostly covered by the people who subscribe to read the Wall Street Journal. So yeah, I guess it's a little hypocritical for me to say to people, hey, cancel your subscriptions. Go and prune your subscription list. But that's really what our lives have to be. Like that was the piece I wrote, I think 2 years ago, just saying like every year you need to put it on your calendar. This is subscription cleanout day. And you go through your list and you take off the ones you don't use, or you go to them and you try to figure out, are you really paying for the right subscription? I think the big thing that's going to happen this year, and you've probably seen it already, I mean, you said your brother pays for Netflix, which is a very clever trick, is that those subscription costs are going to go up. Like Netflix is constantly raising its price, the monthly price. And this was, I believe it was back in December or November, they raised the price of the most popular plan, which is the lowest end plan, by $1. Disney Plus is going to do it in March. They're going up $1. That's only going to keep happening. It's going to happen so much more, especially as we get into these, they get us in low, and then they say, okay, we've got this recurring revenue. We're going to add more features. People will think they're getting more, and they are getting more. It's not fair to say they're not getting any more. That costs more. We're going to up it. And that's where I think, that's where that process of you got to keep looking at these things. And that's the new way of life for us, is we've just got to keep looking at what we're paying for. And it's so easy to forget about it. I mean, I think one of the good things is if you subscribe through Apple, which there's a lot of debate about, because what cut is Apple taking if you subscribe through them, you can at least go in your App Store icon, you go into your App Store on your iPhone and you can see the list of subscriptions and you can easily press cancel. It's one of the beauties of subscribing through Apple. As many people know, if you don't do that, then you're going to be stuck with the company and you're going through loads and loads of probably customer service levels to say, I want out of this, I want out of that. As Wall Street Journal readers tell me all the time, they can't cancel their subscription.
So it's a long shot when you see a company like Disney, whose business was truly, truly disrupted during the pandemic. I mean, you talk about theme parks, big cash flow generator, just shut down overnight, people not going to the movie theater, ABC and ESPN. ESPN doesn't have live sports in attendance, so they're trying to hit up the cable companies for this. And yet Disney Plus signups with The Mandalorian and everything else going on. And you're a parent now, and the kids are very desperate for their Disney Plus and Pixar and the old classics and everything. And that company hits an all-time high. Its valuation in a year that its business was truly, truly disrupted. I think it's kind of the paradox of this arms race for streaming accounts.
Totally. I think HBO is going to be another winner here. I mean, HBO Max seems to have gone full throttle at this, putting, did you watch Wonder Woman?
No, I did not.
I didn't either. We were maybe the only people. Good thing we're on this podcast together. It seemed like everyone watched it on Christmas.
What is the wisdom of that? I always wondered when HBO shelled out the big bucks, because again, I don't want to stamp this, but the big folly of my age when I was a journalist was, AOL Time Warner, and that was the marriage of content and distribution and everything, and that was a disaster, and that was unwound within 3 years of just this awful Y2K decision. But now we know that AT&T, the wireless giant that also owns DirecTV, it goes out and takes out a ton of debt and shells out all this money for Warner and HBO, and it's pleading with people now to please pay for HBO Max after we've paid for Netflix, after we've paid for Disney Plus. It's like it's the other kid with his hand up in the back of the classroom saying, "Oh, me, pick me." And I always wondered, Joanna, that wasn't this what was the wisdom in a wireless company buying a film studio or a content super shop? Is it going to make your wireless plan more sticky?
I think it's to own it all. I mean, if you look at just the trend, what we're seeing in tech media is to own it all, to have everything in your backyard, really. And I know you talked about this I listened to your podcast you had with Kara Swisher a couple months ago. And when you look at the tech companies, they've gotten into media. When you look at the wireless giants, they've gotten into media and to tech. And so everyone sort of wants to have one piece of have the whole pie, really. In the sense of AT&T, I think it is owning that all. I mean, you've got a subscriber base that is got powerful computers that you sell them powerful computers, you sell them smartphones. That unlocks a lot of tools. That unlocks a lot of business.
Are you convinced that Apple is a true kind of wholehearted content shop? I talked about Tehran, which we're now streaming. It has us on the edge of our seat. This cliffhanger series about Mossad,
what is
in
that
Iran.
On?
It's so good. Apple TV Plus, which was another login that I had to go in and get this week.
I pay for that too. Yeah, of course.
Yeah, so I pay for that too, but that's like multi-homing, as they say. Like, how many credit cards do you want to carry in your wallet? So, do you believe that? Like, Apple is out there. They have some big names, Jennifer Aniston, other people that they signed up in this. There's a Tom Hanks film on it. It seems like the era of the kind of the tech media mega conglomerate is back after a lot of these players broke themselves up into small pieces last decade or the decade before.
Okay, first thing, the morning show on Apple TV Plus is actually great. I will say it's like one of the best streaming shows I've watched. I know that's going to be might be the most controversial thing I say on your podcast, but it's very good. And it's the reason I started really subscribing to Apple Plus, even though, I had gotten the free or whatever. I would pay for it. I would pay for it for the morning show. But what I should have done is stop paying for it. And then now, like, you tell me Tehran is good and start paying for Apple TV Plus again for this, month or two
it's not, at the very least, it's not a massive annoyance for you that you have to go out when somebody recommends something kind of on an esoteric network. Like, oh, I gotta remember to sign up for that. And I got to remember to get out of it when I'm done binging that thing. I mean, it's so dispersed that you're wondering at some point it's all going to have to be curated for us and collected for us again.
Yeah. I mean, but back to your question about Apple, I do think Apple's a content company. And and the latest example I'm seeing is I've been working out with Apple Fitness Plus. Have you tried that?
No, tell me about it.
And the production quality, it's a Peloton wannabe, without the bike hardware or the treadmill hardware to pair with it, though. I'm going to put out there, I think the big tech companies are going to start to make workout gear or workout hardware. I think it's not a crazy idea. But what they do is basically just highly produced workout classes, from biking to stretching to weight lifts. I've done the weightlifting and the mindful cool downs, they're called. It's really just stretching with a little bit of meditation at the end. And they're really well produced. They pair with your Apple Watch. So if you don't have an Apple Watch, you can't even subscribe. So that's like, just think about the level of the trap on that side, right? Like, you've got to have an iPhone because the Apple Watch doesn't work without the iPhone. And then you've got to have the Apple Watch to have Fitness Plus. So you're so deep into Apple's trap, you're basically unable to ever get out. And then they have these great classes and they're highly produced, and Apple's making them. They're making them in LA. So, and then they're making the TV Plus stuff, and 100% they're a content company.
Full disclosure, I'm Robin Farzad. You're listening to Joanna Stern, senior personal technology columnist and video content all things guru at the Wall Street Journal. Joanna, are you a self-declared cord cutter?
I'm not.
So you still have the cable package and everything? Is it just out of laziness or?
I guess so. My wife really likes to watch some of the cable channels like Bravo and CNN and really just Bravo. And we just never gave it up. And it's like, bundled with the internet service. And like, if I broke it down, I'd probably end up paying for like a Sling or some other sort of other channel based service. So I've just stuck with it. I should look at it this year. This might be the year.
So I always wondered, I mean, if you live in a doorman building, you must be the most annoying tenant because you get all of this unsolicited swag, right? All these companies trying to sell you the next smartphone, the next, combination podcast mic and mixer. What do you do? How do you even, I compare it, when I met Walt Mossberg once, I said it must be like sipping from a fire hydrant, all the product solicitations you get.
Well, the good news is well, first of all, I don't live in a doorman building anymore. I used to, and for sure the doorman used to be very annoyed with me because I'd bring down, of course, it wasn't even the receiving, it was the sending out. So of course, everything I get, I send back, but I do that in like big waves. So at the end of usually every quarter or something, I sit down and, back when in the office, I'd have some assistants with it. I'd say, let's pack up all of these things and get it out the door. But when I was living in the doorman building, I was like constantly bringing like down 15 packages at a time. And they're like, what's this? And I'm like, FedEx is going to pick all this up. And like, well, where should we put it? I'm like, I don't know. It's not my job. But now I live in a townhouse and I guess the FedEx guy's just as annoyed with me. But yes, this has been the big problem of the pandemic. I want to say a big problem. It's really a first world problem for any tech reviewer. But you don't want to give out your home address because then people will start sending you things unsolicited. So I've been trying to keep that very narrow. But now CES is coming and lots of companies, can we send you this, care package for CES? It's like, no, you cannot. Please don't send me anything. So I try to stay as far off of those lists and because it's actually quite annoying. I don't want to get stuff that, first of all, I always return it. I'm going to have to return it. And if I'm not going to have time to test it, then it just sits here. And that's a waste of shipping. And, it's not good for the environment. I'm saving the environment one box at a time, really.
I know you're in the market for an extended warranty for your Volvo, but I digress. I was struck by the video piece that you did because I've been thinking about VR all of 2020 and continuing to the present now that the NBA season is back without fans, largely. The future of your office is in a VR headset, virtual reality headset. And I love the avatar that you created. Everybody should go and check this out on the Wall Street Journal's website. You can Google it, September 28th, 2020. Why isn't that technology there? I thought Facebook was a big player in VR technology. We should have been able, just like you could flick on the switch with Zoom in the spring of 2020, you should be able to flick on a switch with any sports event and be in attendance as long as you had the hardware at home. But nobody seemed to have that.
Yeah, and even though I have it here, it is hard to get people to like want to put on the headset, or even people I know who have the headset. It's like, let's go hang out in VR. And I should maybe backtrack a little bit and explain this piece that I was where I talked about that you can recreate your office space in VR. So there are these companies. The main one I featured is called Spatial, which lets you customize this avatar, where you just upload a photo of yourself. It can be a selfie, it can be a headshot, and it makes this weird looking avatar of you, and it looks like you, and you put on your headset and that's you, and you go to this sort of virtual conference room space, right, is the best way to explain it. And you meet up with your colleagues. And I did this a couple of months into the pandemic, and I was like, wow. I would take off my headset and be like, I just hung out with Adam, or I just saw one of my colleagues. Like, I would feel like I was really there with them. And
so how much does that headset cost, for example?
Well, the new Oculus Quest costs $300.
So $300 and then tacked on to a smartphone, right? I mean,
you don't need it. You don't need it.
So all you need is a Wi-Fi connection at home. What's the bottleneck that prevented this from being dispersed so widely during the work from home scenario? And I'm not just talking about work from home. I'm talking about attending concerts that you otherwise wouldn't be able to attend. I wanted to see the NBA Finals in person. I wanted to attend a Lakers game when we had these bizarre cardboard and LCD cutouts in the stands. But even with a player like Facebook owning a lot of this technology and IP, nobody was ready to unleash it on us.
And that's the biggest question, right? Because the price hurdle stopped being there. I mean, it stopped this holiday season. And it looks like, I mean, Facebook hasn't announced numbers, but based on app downloads, the Oculus Quest app was like one of the most downloaded apps after Christmas. And, just hearing from Facebook's head of AR and VR, it's a very, they've said they've had the best quarter and time ever for VR. So certainly they're selling more of them. But is it like a home... do all your friends have VR headsets? No, but many more of them do. Like I was hanging out with one of the dads from my son's class, and he was like, "Yeah, no, I love working out in VR." And I was like, "Oh, tell me about your." He's like, "I do it every day. I work out in VR." And I was like, he said, "I started doing it during the pandemic." So more and more people are doing it. I don't. Is this one of those moments where the pandemic happens, we get used to something, and then we all start going back to the office or creating our new lives, which are a hybrid, I think, of being in the office and being at home, and we sort of give it up, possibly. But I do think a lot of it will stick around for when those AR glasses come from these companies and that timing is right, and then these things just carry over to that.
Yeah, you mentioned Facebook, which owns the Oculus technology, was an acquisition that's kind of forgotten now that the company is so massive. Mark Zuckerberg, the founder and CEO of Facebook, his net worth is north of $100 billion. He's the fourth richest person on the planet, the only person under 40 on the Forbes list of the 20 richest people. Joanna, what is Facebook's goal in life at this point? I mean, it draws so much controversy over its role in disinformation, the way it cross-tracks you from Instagram to WhatsApp to Messenger, how ubiquitous it is. There seems to be a congressional flare-up every 2 or 3 months. One wonders, why don't they just leave well enough or bad enough alone? I mean, Bill Gates at this point left Microsoft and recreated his reputation, became philanthropic. What is Facebook looking to mine from us now?
I think it's this next future platform. I mean, when you look at, and I think the most exciting stuff happening at Facebook is in that AR and VR division, which is run by Andrew Bosworth, who is one of Mark Zuckerberg's inner crew and has run different parts of Facebook. And I think that the interesting thing they're trying to do there is build, like, what's the next future of social media? What's the next future thing that overlays what they've already built? And AR and VR seems to be a huge part of that. And they're developing things that you really could see in 10 years down the line. We are able to just fully connect and be in the office and be with our friends with the headset on. With holograms appearing in our living room is not a crazy idea. And that's all built off of us logging in still to our Facebook accounts, whether it be, Instagram or WhatsApp or whatnot. That's just the underlying, I would say, that's sort of like the sheet that they've been laying. Where those actual platforms keep going and what kind of government scrutiny what ends up befalling them, I can't say. I think the one big outcome is that hopefully these companies will stop acquiring so many other companies and there'll start to be more air in the room for other companies and innovation to happen. That's at least a hope for me.
And parallel to this, how and where do you consume your news? Walk me through a news consumption day. It's not like you sit with the paper Wall Street Journal. Do you read it on a tablet with a half of a grapefruit?
How do you know?
I don't know.
Every morning I walk to the mailbox. I get my Wall Street Journal and New York Times. No, I don't. I don't do any of that. I'd like to dream that that's what I do, because it feels like that's sort of what I want to return to.
No, but what is a good way of doing it, and how do you filter out the noise? Because Twitter does do many things great, but at times it's just analysis paralysis. You're getting bombarded with things, and you don't know whether to follow the hashtags. LinkedIn, there's a lot of PR centric fluff and anodyne stuff. So where do you go to kind of cut to the chase?
I rely on a couple of different just regular news apps. I mean, I definitely spend way too much time on Twitter. I'm trying to battle that. I try to limit my times of the day on Twitter. I try to limit what I tweet. Sometimes I have the willpower, sometimes I don't. I definitely just sort of turn to the apps. I read the Wall Street Journal app, I read the New York Times app. I sometimes even, glance through Apple News. I stopped paying for the Apple News Plus subscription because I didn't find I was actually reading as much of what's in there. I mean, the Wall Street Journal is part of that, and I already have the subscription there. What about you? Where do you read your news? Maybe give me some tips.
I mean, I read too much of it on Twitter. I feel badly that,
Right.
What are these aggregators? There's Google News, Apple News was very strange. And I run into the same problem with login fatigue right now, where I see an interesting long read and it wants me, all right, if you want to read the whole thing, subscribe. There's no true option for us to kind of a la carte go out there yet and maybe buy one big long piece that you want to see. It's kind of all or nothing. And there is a tremendous amount of fatigue. I mean, you pay for the Journal, you pay for the Times, you pay for your local paper. What about The Economist? Fortune. Everybody else is like these. It feels like this nest full of hungry chicks that is like, no, feed me,
Right.
feed me. And I gotta feed the Netflix too. I gotta feed the cable company and the wireless bill as well.
I've been getting bigger on newsletters. There's a couple of tech newsletters that I try to read every morning or at least skim through. There's some of the weekly news digest newsletters that I try to look through. But it's sort of the similar thing in podcast world, right? Like how many podcasts can you listen to? How many newsletters can you subscribe to? How many publications can you subscribe to? People hit a limit. I feel lucky to be a creator that and a journalist that people follow and will subscribe to and read. But I know that struggle too. I mean, it's hard to get everyone to watch every single one of my videos that I do. I'm beholden to.
Oh, but they do. But they do. And what's beautiful is you just walked into my trap. Yes, and the beautiful thing is that only my mother listens to this podcast in the end. But we are hearing about Substack left and right, and it's the ultimate vehicle of self-determination for the very proficient and popular content maker like a Joanna Stern. I have no doubt that you get unsolicited job offers from places like the New York Times, the various magazines, the various billionaire-owned places are like, oh my gosh, I love her stuff. I have to poach her. I don't want you to lose your job on my account. But what is this whole newsletter social compact thing where suddenly I'm hearing about stars decamping from major publications to become like sole proprietors? Like you're hanging up your own Joanna Stern shingle, much like Walt Mossberg did with, All Things Digital.
It's really interesting. And we've all seen these waves. I mean, I see it as is this the next wave of the blogs, right? Like we all sort of dabbled in blogs, and blogs were just really an underlying technology. It wasn't a media platform. And so are newsletters. Newsletters is just a technology platform. It's just a way of disseminating information, and it just happens to come to your email inbox. I think that what's happening, I mean, I really have so much admiration, and I think of the people who have sort of left some of their jobs, and I think they're quite brave to go at it. And I think it's a really good thing that people are trying. Casey Newton is a friend of mine, and he writes I guess it's called The Platformer now, but used to write the popular newsletter for The Verge, and he went to Substack. And his mission is really just independent journalism, and he wants to build independent journalism that's funded by people, that people have to pay for, and he and others really believe in that model. I think it's going to be an interesting experiment to see how many people can survive on that.
Joanna, in the 5 minutes I have left with you, I cannot resist. You have to tell me the story of your life with Twitter and finding the love of your life. A spark ignited on Twitter is the famous story in the New York Times, the marriage read from 2017. Tell me how it happened.
And you know what? This is such a perfect way to end this podcast, because it does remind me, and I know, I started this podcast talking about
the dangers, right?
Their dangers, and a day like today where I feel like, God, with the smartphone and the social media apps it gave rise to are horrible, and look what it's done to the world. But there's always the good, and I think that's I try to bring the optimism with so much of my technology coverage, and so I think this is such a great story. It's the best thing technology ever did for me. I was just a young girl on the internet searching for love. No, I wasn't searching for love at all. I was was like searching it, the Twitter there was a popular show at the time on Showtime called The L Word. I had been searching for it. I saw a woman. I tweeted back to her. She said something funny about the L Word. And she direct messaged me. At the time, no one would say she slid into my DMs. This was 100 million years ago on the internet. We're so old. Yes. And she was like, "I know you." And she had a different account name, and so I wouldn't have known her from her like Twitter account. She's like, "I know you. I work in tech PR. I pitched you on so and such thing." And I had been at the time working at Laptop Magazine, a very small tech publication where I got my start. And I was like, oh, wow. And we just started talking from there. And we were friends at first. And then it was just a beautiful lesbian love story on Twitter.
Shouldn't Twitter have like co-sponsored your marriage, or at least the ketubah or something? I mean, would that have crossed like a conflict of interest?
It definitely would have. I proposed on Twitter. I mean,
Oh
yeah, I mean, I tried to. We were in Hawaii. We flew to Hawaii, and I was like, I'm going to propose on Twitter, and then she's going to get the alert, and then she's going to look at that, and she's going to be like, oh my God, is this real? That's not what happened. Like I tweeted it on my phone. We were on the beach, and like 15 minutes later, I'm like, can you look at Twitter? And like all these people had seen it on Twitter before, and so they're like, did she say yes? What happened? But yeah, that was the Twitter love story. And it turns out actually lots of people had met on Twitter during that time. I think it was, it was the early days. It wasn't, what was it, 2000 must have been like 2010, 2009 maybe. Twitter wasn't what it is now. I mean, certainly.
I come for the news and I stay for the self-loathing, right? I mean, I don't know why I'm suddenly drawn to it. People are like, why do you tweet so much? And then there's, you have this direct channel to tens of thousands of people, and that's what's so different. I mean, back in the day, someone would have to find your email or write you correspondence, at Mother Dow downtown, and now they can just tweet at you, for better or for worse.
And again, bringing it full circle. I mean, I go to Twitter now for the blue warning labels. Really, what is the blue warning label they're going to put on our president's tweet today? This is a fun game I like to play in the morning. I don't know. Am I the only one that plays that?
Do you think he ultimately gets kicked off of Twitter? I mean, he's the most tagged big celebrity on Twitter with like 60, 70 million followers. And if you're actually inciting insurrection or sedition or something, if that's not grounds to at least get suspended, I wonder, especially when he's out of office, how Twitter's going to handle it.
I don't want to say anything on this podcast because by the time this publishes, something might have happened. I don't know. Like, I mean, this is a great thing to do today because it required me to spend, 50 minutes not looking at Twitter, not looking at anything going on my computer. And so thank you for doing this for me. This was really just therapy and a good distraction. But like, I don't know, we could open Twitter right now and they could have, blocked out everything he's ever written. I have no idea. I mean, that's probably me being hopeful. They probably have done nothing.
Well, if you say that I am therapy, Joanna Stern, your videos have been therapy for me. I love the stuff that you do out there. I'm really proud from you. I'm kind of failing from a distance. But if I am therapy, feel free to Venmo me a copay or do whatever you kids do these days. Bitcoin.
I will. But first I have to, from the sounds of this podcast, you're actually 200 years old. I mean, you can't be older than...
I am 44. I am 44.
So you're not that old. From this, I'm getting a sense that like you're...
No, I'm not going to get hired by a major public. You are the future right now. Like you're a bona fide millennial. Like I've been put out to pasture. I'm email, MySpace,
Email
Hotmail,
is hot right now. We just talked about Substack. Like everyone wants to be in your email. Email is the coolest thing. So yeah, embrace everything you've learned about email in 40 years.
Well, thank you for embracing us. And please come back. Give us your Twitter deets everywhere you can be found.
Everywhere on Joanna Stern, just Joanna Stern. That on Twitter, on Instagram. I'm really trying to build my Instagram following right now.
Likewise.
It's not that easy.
I'll post this to Instagram. Joanna Stern, senior personal technology columnist at the Wall Street Journal. And you called Walt Mossberg a mensch. Does that make you a menschtress or a macharit? I don't know. I always try to kind of throw this around, but there isn't a straight up word for it.
I'm nothing close to whatever he is.
Please come back.
Well, I will. And one day I'll have a podcast and you can be on there.
I will, for sure.
Thanks so much.
Full disclosure, our engineer is John Valentine. Subscribe to Full Disclosure on Apple Podcasts at linkfulldradio.com. We are on NPR One and Spotify and all fine podcatchers. You can follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Full D Radio. And a shout out to our radio listeners in Northern Virginia, Washington, D.C., and down in Asheville, North Carolina. Holler if you'd like to pick up this show on your air. I'm Robin Farzad, back with you next week.